Okay, so how is everyone doing? Uh, okay, yeah, I have everything all set up. Okay, yeah, so how's everyone doing? I guess since the last time we got together, me and Alex are still getting together the kind of like the schedules for what we're thinking for Facebook Live classes. And I know I talked about that the last time we were together. And so that's still kind of being worked out. But I do want to know how everybody's doing since we have some really interesting transits going on, especially since the Venus retrograde has happened since the last time we saw each other. We're actually about to go into a Mercury retrograde at the end of August. I do believe August 23rd. Um, and it's crazy because I think it's actually like almost exactly a month after the Venus retrograde started that Mercury retrograde will be starting. And so for I think a little over a week, we'll actually have, or no, yeah, no, a little over a week, like 9 days, we'll actually have both Venus and Mercury retrograde at the same time. So I just kind of want to check in with everyone. Anyone have any stories about relationship, money, um, self-confidence, or different like changing values that you guys have had so far? If you would like to type it in the chat, you can, or you can come on the mic um, so that we can just kind of exchange transit stories. I think that's like one of the best ways to kind of get a feel for what's going on right now. Jules, you wanted to share? We're still kind of getting everyone in. But yeah, if anybody wanted to jump on the mic, let me know.
I'll go. Um, Everyone around me is seeming to be a little more volatile, I suppose.
Mhm.
And I actually went through my first breakup-ish, and I got a lot of that. That itself wasn't necessarily a self-confidence booster, but the feelings that came from it kind of helped me bust through emotions that was holding me back from being more assertive and what's the other word? I'll just basically faking it till I make it with self-confidence.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, sometimes that's what you got to do. I was talking to someone about actually like, just kind of faking it till you make it. It was in a different context, but it was about like building strength for a for like dance. And I was telling the instructor, I was like, yeah, some of the movements that I do, I just kind of like cheat my way through it, but it's not like it makes it easier. If anything, it probably makes it harder. Um, but I, and she was telling me, she was like, yeah, sometimes it's okay to cheat because that it doesn't make it easier, but you're still building strength just in a very different way. And so sometimes you do have to, you know, fake it till you make it. um, yeah, but no, thank you for sharing that, honey. Does anybody else have any stories about relationships or Venus related? We'll be talking more about transits, or not transits, well, maybe transits. I don't know if we'll get that far today, but we'll be talking, doing a little bit of review from last class. But I did want to give everybody time to talk about some of the things that they've kind of been experiencing. Stories. I think that's a cool way to just kind of learn astrology.
Are you talking right now, Micah? Because we can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I just need to hold I'm sorry, I'm in between two devices, and so I just need to hold my phone up a little bit closer to me. My bad. Thank you. Okay, so does anybody have any stories before I start reviewing from last class?
It's been a while since we had our last class. Is that right, Micah?
Yeah, if you, if hold on one second. Let me, because I'm like, for some reason, my call volume is really low. Let me see if I can fix that. Okay, could someone say something?
Can you hear me?
That's much better. Okay. Yeah. Re-ask your question. I'm sorry.
I'm just wanted to verify that the last class we had together has been a long time.
Yeah, so the last class we had was a month ago. Actually, it's a little bit over a month ago. I think the last class was July 8th. Yeah, July 8th. And so yeah, no, it's we only do the classes once a month. Um, and so if you were at that class, then it has been a while, but if you weren't at that class, then it's definitely been a while. Did you have some concerns about attending this class?
No, not at all. I just wanted to verify that it has been a long time and so I hadn't
Gotcha.
missed anything.
Gotcha. Yeah. If anybody, I encourage everyone, even if it's your first class, to just kind of stay and listen, because I think that's a really good way to just kind of get your feet wet, even though it might feel like you're drowning a little bit. Just to kind of listen, even if you don't completely understand what's being said. Sometimes just like seeing and hearing other people talk about it. Um, is really helpful in astrology because then you can go back and when we eventually repeat this course over, things will start to make a lot more sense a bit quicker because you've already watched it. Um, and so the things that I'm talking about or other people are asking questions about, you'll be like, oh, I see. That's why they were asking this, or that's why this was being said, or this term makes sense now. And so it's completely fine if you don't understand everything. It's always good to just kind of um, just listen. But if you feel uncomfortable at any time, it's completely okay for you to just wait until we have this course started over. I'm not sure exactly when that will be yet. I'm thinking like in the next 3 months, we'll probably start it over. I do still have to talk to Alex about that because I want to get into more predictive astrology. Not that transit astrology isn't predictive, but I want to get into horary astrology and teaching that. And horary astrology is actually astrology that's more centered around asking specific questions like, am I pregnant? Or will I get married? Or will I get the house? Will I get the job? Those kinds of questions can be answered with astrology in an actual chart, but it's a whole different branch of astrology rather than natal chart reading. But it's really good to understand natal chart reading before you go into other branches because it's all the base. Because essentially you're just looking at the natal chart of the question and then interpreting it from there. It's a little different, but you need the basic skills from natal chart reading to understand any of it. And so that's why I say I'm not exactly sure when we're going to be starting the basics class over again, but I will. Me or Alex will let you guys know what happens next after this course is all done. And we should be like on our last couple classes between this one, possibly the next one, depending on how far we get today. So let me pull up the handout from the last class. Give me 1 second here. Okay. So this was the handout from last class. I have it as the name of the actual handout should be Aspects in Astrology. So for those of you, I know that we have a couple people who it's their first the first class, and so I'm going to briefly do a review. But you should also be able to watch the last class and all the classes before on the YouTube channel as well for DiviNation Academy. And if you can't find it, let me know and I can ask Alex if she can go ahead and upload it if it hasn't already been uploaded. But so we have aspects in astrology. So aspects, when you're looking at a chart, basically what the aspects are all those lines in the middle of the chart, in the middle of the circle, that are pointing from one planet glyph, like the symbol or the glyph for Jupiter looks like a letter 4. So you might see like a line, like a red line going from Jupiter to the glyph for Mars or something like that. Or you might see a blue line going from Venus, the symbol for Venus, and the symbol for Mercury. That is also its own handout for those of you who it is your first class. We have a handout for all the planets as well, and it has their respective glyphs listed next to, or their respective symbols listed next to some of the things that are associated with those planets. It's not an exhaustive list by any means, but it's enough to kind of give you a feel for what the planet rules over. So those are aspects, those lines that you see that basically make a natal chart look like code reading. I mean, technically it is, but that is really the meat of natal chart reading. You can read a planetary placement like Jupiter in Taurus, but you don't really get a lot of interpretive, you don't get a lot of interpretation specific to the person without the aspect, because that's what makes it unique from person to person. Yes, the planetary placements in different houses make it unique, but the actual aspects that are being made between planets and how the planets are talking to each other, which are aspects, really make natal chart reading, or even transit reading, because just one planetary placement on its own can only tell you so much, but all the planets are constantly interacting with each other. And so to figure out how that's showing up in a person or in their life or even in day-to-day life, we look at the aspects in particular.
Is there any way we can get a copy of this?
Yes, so all of the handouts should be on DiviNation's website, but if it's not up there, I can send this to Alex after class and she can upload it, because I know that there was like a handout that wasn't put up and I had to resend it to her. And so, yeah, let me know if it's not up there and I can definitely send it to her and she can post it on the website.
Thank you.
Of course. So we have conjunctions, or what's called a co-present. Some people, depending on if you're coming from more of an ancient astrology background versus a modern astrology background, will argue if a conjunction or co-presence is actually an aspect, because technically it's just when two planets are in the same sign together. They don't always have to be in the same sign, but they're very close together. It's like almost like they're holding hands, like they're side by side. So an example of that would be like if Mercury is in Capricorn and Venus is in Capricorn, um, that I would still personally count as a co-presence because it's in the same sign. Some people might argue if Mercury is like at 8 degrees of Capricorn and Venus is like at 18, then it technically isn't a conjunction or co-presence because it's outside of what we would call an orb or the range of what we consider a conjunction. And usually all planets, except for, again, this is depending on what background of astrology you prefer, whether it be ancient astrology, ancient Hellenistic astrology, or modern astrology. That's going to differ, but usually for the sun and moon, we give like an extra 2 degrees, like wiggle room. But for the purpose of this class, I'm just going to say if it's in the same sign, it's a co-presence because you're just getting a mix of the two planets together is basically what a conjunction is. So if Mercury and Venus are together, maybe you have someone that is very interested in talking about their values. Mercury being the actual talking part, and Venus being the values part. So you're just kind of mushing them together. Or maybe it's someone that likes to travel to beautiful places, you know, or they're really interested or they really value learning. Could be, I think, one of the ways that I would interpret that is they really value ideas and conversation. Mercury being just kind of like the conversation and Venus being the values again. So that would be a conjunction or co-presence. This can also happen if the planets are not in the same sign, but then you have to take into account the degrees. So if like Mercury is at a 29 degree of Capricorn, and then like Venus is at like 1 degrees of Aquarius, you could still count that as a conjunction because they're within the orb. So the orb really comes into play the most, I personally think, when you're talking about the two planets not being in the same sign, but they're still close together. Any questions about conjunctions or co-presences? Whichever one you want to call them is fine. Okay, and so a sextile. So sextiles are going to hold the general energy of Venus. Think of it, the way that I personally think about this is not through like actual like degrees and numbers. I can do math. I'm just not a person that remembers like 60 degrees here, 120 degrees here if it's not in front of me. So what I think of with sextiles is that it is a sextile automatically if the two planets that you're looking at are in different elements, different sign elements. So, but the elements of that sign, of those two signs, are compatible. So, like fire and air are compatible. However, they're not in opposition. So, fire and air are compatible, but you will find that you have oppositions within those. So, like Leo and Gemini is a sextile. You have air sign, you have a fire sign. That is not an opposition. So they work well together, but it's not Leo and Aquarius, which Aquarius is going to be in opposition to Leo. Let's see, Cancer and Pisces, not Cancer and Pisces, because that's a trine. Cancer and Taurus is a sextile. Think of it like they are two different energies that mesh really well, almost like sex is like the way that I remember it. Two very different energies that mesh well together. They support each other. They both bring their own thing to the table, but they do really well together. And they make something new. is going to be a sextile. Very harmonious Venus energy is what we look at when we have what we're kind of like interpreting when we are looking at a sextile. So an example of this would be, let's say you had, let's continue like with this Mercury Venus kind of example. So if you had like Mercury in Libra, and it's in a sextile to Venus in Leo, which I actually think, no, that's not happening right now. It's about to, but so let's say Mercury in Libra is in a sextile to Venus in Leo. You would say that the Mercury things that Libra, that Venus, not Venus, Mercury in Libra is trying to express is going to mesh really well with the values that Venus in Leo is expressing. So to interpret that, you would need to still break down the individual interpretations of each planet placement, and then you just kind of smack them together. They're going to be very different because they're in different elements altogether in different signs. But again, they bring two very different things to the table, but they add to each other. They support each other. They're not going to fight, so there's going to be no tension between the two. And so together, something that you could interpret from that could be like it's just somebody that's very creative, because Venus in Leo is very creative, and Mercury in Libra is going to be somebody that actually brings people together, or is somebody that maybe like is not hard to talk to. I feel like I could describe that a bit better, but like that's the gist of it. And so it can be putting that together with Venus and Leo, which is like, you know, I'm very creative and people are just kind of drawn to me. With the Mercury and Libra aspect, it's kind of like the life of the party kind of person, or that kind of like general feeling if we were putting it in the context of a transit. So that is sextiles. Any questions about that before we move on to the square? Okay, so as to where we have a sextile, which is of the energy of Venus, we have a square, which is a 90-degree angle. The way that I always remember it is that it is going to be two signs that are of the same modality. So like Taurus and Leo are a square. So they're not opposite each other, but they are in elements, sign elements that are not compatible. So Leo's a fire sign, Taurus is an earth sign. They don't mesh well. So there's automatically some tension there. We see that squares take on Mars energy. So there's friction, there's conflict. We're actually going to talk about squares quite a bit today because we have actually a lot going on right now with squares, or this Venus retrograde is actually causing a lot of squares, which honestly I'm kind of living for because I've never seen like or not never seen, but like I just think this Venus retrograde is very exaggerated, and it's like just like typical Venus retrograde kind of events happening, but they're much more exaggerated and dramatic because of some of the squares that are happening, but also because it's Venus and Leo retrograde. And so we are going to be talking about squares because this Venus in retrograde is making a lot of squares to different planets that have made a lot of drama happen. So when we're looking at squares, it's a 90-degree angle, or you can think about it, if you're not a numbers person like I'm not, then you can look at it just like as you're looking at two different signs or planetary placements that are in signs that have incompatible elements, excuse me, or but have the same mode or the same modality, whichever one you want to call that. So both Taurus and Leo are fixed signs, but they are in fire and earth signs. So though it's automatically a square. Another example of this would be Cancer and Libra. So they're both cardinal signs. However, one is an air sign and one is a water sign. It's a square. Another one would be Gemini and Virgo. One is an earth sign, one is an air sign, but they are both mutable. Just as like a slight just as like a slight not transit as a slight tangent, some squares as far as like transits are easier than others, because we're going to, especially next year, we're going to be experiencing mutable squares with Jupiter. Squares are never fun. However, when you have mutable squares, it's just a lot of change. Whereas fixed squares are a bit harder to work through because everything is so solid, everything is so extreme. Cardinal squares are going to create a lot of tension because it's a lot of action that is needed. And if you're thinking about the energy you're already working with a square, it's very action packed. It's very much on the go right now. Let's do this. And so when you look at squares, when we start to talk about transits, I would say also take that in mind, or keep that in mind. But for right now, just remember that squares are more of like a Mars energy. So they cause some sort of conflict and tension. And the way that you usually relieve that tension is by creating some sort of change or action. So the next one, any questions about squares before we move on to trines?
I do.
Go ahead.
If someone has a lot of squares in their chart, will that person tend to be contradictory to themselves a lot?
It can, yeah, definitely, depending on what planets are squaring off with each other. So which one, if you are comfortable sharing, which ones in particular?
I'm pretty sure all of them at some point.
Okay.
Like the Sun and Moon, Venus and Moon,
Mhm.
Neptune and Saturn. And then there's also I don't think we've talked about these, but like Chiron and the Moon. I'm not sure what a
Mhm.
node is, but like node is the
Mhm.
Sun and Venus, Lilith and Uranus, Chiron and node, Fortune with Jupiter and Saturn,
Mhm.
also the Midhaven with Jupiter and Saturn.
Yeah.
So
So
like
I'm gonna pick out. I'm just gonna briefly talk about like two of the aspects you just talked about. So like the moon Venus square can be rough. I personally also have that in my chart as well. So because you're having like your habits, your comfort, and security in a Mars like aspect to uh basic harmony with the planet of harmony, um or like values and relationships. So it can be talking a lot about literal comfort is a struggle within the self-esteem or like with other people that might be represented by Venus, depending on what house Venus is sitting in. So like Venus can just be women in general, but I guess the question, like if were looking at the chart, would be okay, like, but women where? So that could lead to like what kind of women? So like, so let's say it's like Venus in the fifth house or something like that. So it could be like women that are possibly like very dramatic or like in show business or just like creative women. There can be like some sort of like emotional upset because of that square in particular. The other one I wanted, um, okay, I'll thank you, Danny. I'll make sure I send this to Alex so that you guys can have the handouts for this Jesus Christ. I'm losing my train of thought for this actual. No problem. For this, um, okay, sorry, I'm trying to say a whole bunch of things all at once. I'm tongue-tied. This is Mercury retrograde pre-shadow. I will make sure that you guys have these handouts for this class. Thanks for just kind of riding with me on that tongue-tied roller coaster. Okay, so yeah, I'll email Alex. But yeah, so the other one I want to talk about is the midheaven square to what planet was it?
Sorry. That is actually to Mars, Jupiter, and Ascendant.
Okay, so like let's pick Jupiter. So like the things that Jupiter would represent in your chart clash with the midheaven is not an actual planet, but it's an angle that depicts career and how you show up in the rest of the world. So whatever Jupiter is trying to express it has a lot of tension, which can lead to a lot of different interpretations depending on the sign and the house that Jupiter is in, and then what's happening in the 10th house or in the midheaven. Those two things are in conflict. So the way that this generally, I'm not saying in your chart in particular, that could be interpreted. Let's say that Jupiter is like in Virgo, but you have your midheaven in. So if somebody like, I'm sorry, I'm trying to like make this make sense. So I'm thinking like if it's like a Virgo rising and Jupiter's in the first house, then that would put the 10th house as Gemini. Um, so maybe 10th house, so that would mean like that the 10th house or the midheaven would be about communication, talking to people out in the world, or maybe wanting to debate or having a job that has to do with communication, and just learning new things constantly, but not actually fact checking it. But Jupiter in Virgo wants to fact check things. And so it can also be a bit of a perfectionist as well. And so while Gemini is just like, let's talk about it, Jupiter in Virgo is going to be like, we can't talk about it until we know the facts, which those two are just very different. Because you on one hand, it's your job to talk about things. It's not your job to fact check it necessarily. So I'm thinking about this in like the way of like a newscaster. It's just their job to report the news. They don't have to necessarily know all the facts. They're just giving you the story. But Jupiter and Virgo is going to be like, but no, I want to know the story. So like the whole story, and then fact check it before I present it out to the world. So that's going to be a conflict, because maybe that means that you take a bit of extra time on the things you're reporting, or that the things you're saying out to the world, which could lead to maybe like missing deadlines, or being a little, taking a bit of a longer time to finish studies. There can be like some delays there as well, that can happen through that square. Person of blessing to me. Thank you. Yeah, no, definitely Virgo energy is also going to be something, because I pulled some celebrity charts. I didn't unfortunately finish pulling all of them, so at some point we are going to have to take like a small little break for me to pull up the rest of them. But I haven't named any of the celebrities, but it'll be fun because we can guess whose chart it is. I guess I'm also assuming that you guys haven't looked up these people's charts, but we're going to do that and kind of look at some of the aspects in their chart, but also some of the transits that are happening in their chart, activating different parts of the natal chart. But that'll be after we do review. So let's look at the next one, which is going to be a trine. So trines are going to be probably the most harmonious aspect if we're not like taking conjunctions into account. I love that. Yeah. Cleaning and organizing is definitely like a very Virgo thing. So yeah, trines are going to basically be like when you have two planetary placements that are not in the same sign, but they're in the same element. So like Capricorn and Virgo are going to be a trine. Capricorn and Taurus are going to be a trine. Taurus and Virgo are a trine. So when you hear, I don't know if anybody like, listens to their horoscope. I'm assuming everybody here does. But when you hear an astrologer say like, oh, there's a grand trine means that there is a planet that is touching um, each sign of that element. So it's three. So a grand trine is always going to be three of the same sign. So it's basically all of them. So if someone says it's a grand trine, it's a grand air trine, and they're saying that there's a planet in all three air signs or all three earth, fire, water signs, whichever one. But a trine in general is just going to be two or more planets in the same element. And so it's kind of like if you have like like a water trine, or even a grand water trine, it's kind of like adding more of that element into that element. So it's like if you have a glass of water, think of a trine as adding more water to that cup. It's the same thing, it's just adding more of it to that. And so it's really harmonious. It does well. Trines are of the energy of Jupiter. So it's expansion on its own energy. Trines are really easy. Trines can also be called the lazy aspects because often when we see them in a birth chart or in a transit, it's a time where we feel very comfortable. We're literally in our element. There's a lot of support. There's a lot of adding to of whatever element is being activated through that planet. And so things feel easier. What I would say, just kind of like, with trines, is because they're so easy, it's also very easy to not work through trines. I'm guilty of this in particular. With transits is like when everything feels great, then I'm like, oh, I don't need to do that hard thing that I know that will help me in the long run, because everything feels fine right now. But trines are going to be maybe like best used to get some of the harder things done. And that's just kind of like my little 2 cents. But trines are, they're great because they add a lot of extra support to whatever planet is being activated, either in the natal chart or in the transit. I don't think I expressed what a transit is. So I'm just going to do that right now. So a transit is when we have like the current planets, like Venus right now is in Leo. Venus is currently moving, even though it's retrograde. Um, and so it is transiting somewhere in your chart. So Leo might be your second house. So we would say Venus is transiting your second house. It's moving through your second house, or it's moving within your second house, however you want to put it. We could also use that in like saying that it's crossing over or making some sort of aspect to another planet in your chart. So like if Mars was passing over your Mercury, we would say Mars is transiting your Mercury. It doesn't have to be passing right over a planet of yours to be transiting it. It can be in an opposition, it can be in a square, it can be in a trine or conjunction or co-presence or whatever. But all that we're really saying when we're talking about transits is that one planet in real time is moving and it's activating or touching on a touching on your natal chart and making something happen. I want to refrain from saying that your natal chart planets are not moving, because I mean, it's just a screenshot. Your natal chart is just a screenshot of what was happening when you were born. But your chart is always evolving. And so that's mainly just why I want to say that, it's not necessarily straight and stationary, but we're saying that basically we're looking at real time planets moving over that snapshot of your chart. Any questions about trines before we move on to oppositions? The big red triangle, if it's red, then it might not be especially if it's a triangle, because triangles are, if it's like a actual triangle, then it's probably going to be one, if it's red, I guess depending on what chart, what website you used to pull up your chart. Usually trines are AstroSeek. Okay, let me double check that. I was like, let me see. No, okay, yeah. So AstroSeek, they have their actual trines in blue, and then hard aspects are going to be red. So if it's red, then it's going to be a mixture of a couple different aspects. But I would say also it depends on what, and I know you said you're using AstroSeek, but I do want to also point out that it won't always be like red and blue. I think like Cafe Astrology uses like purple or something like that, and like some use dotted lines and things like that, but usually the general like thumb rule is that most websites will use like hard aspects such as like an opposition or a square are going to be in red, and then easier aspects like a trine or a sextile are going to be in blue. Sometimes like sextiles will be green, but again, it depends. So let me just flip back. I had to look at that for a second on AstroSeek. Okay, so we have oppositions. So an opposition is going to be another example, just like a square, of a hard aspect. It's literally when you have two planets in two opposite signs. So like Leo and Aquarius are going to be opposite signs. So if you have two planets that are in each of those signs, two or more planets in each of those signs, they're opposing each other, they're in opposition. Oppositions are of the energy of Saturn. And so with that, I'll also say that usually oppositions are trying to do the same thing. However, it's just in very different ways. They have like the same kind of like base intent. Is there any way to zoom in on the, oh, yeah, let me try to zoom in. Hold on 1 second. I should be able to, because uh, 1 second. There we go. Okay. Is that a bit better? Let me know. If not, I can zoom in a little bit more if needed. No problem. Okay. So oppositions are going to just be that. So oppositions, just like how we talked about it, I think briefly in our first ever class together, they are going to be in um, in signs that are either right across from each other, you can interpret it that way, or like the planetary energy that rules each sign is opposite to each other. So like Cancer and Capricorn, you have a luminary ruled sign, which is Cancer, is ruled by the moon. It's a luminary, is always going to be opposite a Saturn ruled sign, which in this case is going to be Capricorn. And so it's an opposition. Let's keep going with that and kind of like try to kind of unpack what would happen if you had like a planet in each of those signs. So, because I said they had stuff in common. So Cancer is going to be like more emotional. Um, However, it's about security, but it's more about like security about home and domestic life. Whereas Capricorn is also about security, but it's like I have to take care of people. So I have to go out in the world to work so I can take care of home, or I can take care of the people that mean something to me. I guess you could go to extremes for either, but what they both have in common is I need security. I need something that I can hold on to. One is going to be the private life, and one is going to be, what you see in the in the outside world. But what you can bring between the both of them is I need some sort of security, either from material things, and I need that through like actually making the money to get the house for my family. And the other one is saying, okay, but this is how we make that house a home. And so they're aiming for the same things, just in very different ways, is where you have some of the tension in oppositions. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so a mode is going to be, that one should be on the DiviNation website, but a mode is going to be basically, it's one of the building blocks of astrology. So it's not going to be the element, but it's going to be basically how a sign expresses itself. Like it's one of the base kind of foundations of the sign. So not every, like, let's say, like not every air sign is going to be the same. They're all air signs. So they're all going to be about some sort of like communication or connecting with another person. However, what makes Libra very different from, let's say, like Aquarius is going to be, one, Libra is a cardinal sign, which we talked about, like cardinal signs mark either like an equinox or a solstice. In this case, Libra is going to be the fall equinox. And so it's a pivot point because it's cardinal energy, which gives it certain traits. So like cardinal signs are going to be more action oriented. They're going to want to make something happen. They're going to get something moving, just like the fall season or the season of fall is a major pivot point in the year. Um, Whereas, like, say, Aquarius is the continuation of whatever sign came before it. So it's a bit more solid. It's about building momentum rather than starting something off. So it's a difference in expression. To I would just say, yeah, go back to that first. It's called the handout is called Astro Gems. It's an acronym, but the handout I do believe is called Astro Gems. And there's lots of notes about it, and that one definitely should be up on the website. But yeah, it's just basically just kind of like not harp too much on it. It's a difference in expression. Does that answer your question, Andrea?
Kind of. I thought like modes would be whether there's cardinal or fixed or mutable.
Yeah, so that's what modes are. So
Okay.
like, yeah. So I guess maybe I misinterpreted your question. Were you asking about like how that relates to a trine?
No, just the definition of what the mode is.
Oh,
And
okay.
I took an astrology course with what's her name now? Boland. Yasmin Boland.
Mhm.
And that's where I learned about the um different signs aspects, is that you have your cardinal, you have your fixed, and you have your mutable.
Mhm. Yeah. No, yeah, definitely mutable, or not mutable. Modes are going to be just a energy in which it expresses itself, how the element expresses itself. Because we have different modes for each air sign, different modes for each fire, water sign as well. But all of those are different because not because of the element, because the element will always remain the same, but like within a trine, but how that energy is expressed and what time of year it's coming at is also a big thing. Um, and how it actually expresses the energy on top of how, on top of like the actual planet that rules the sign. So it all just kind of comes together. But I'd
Thank
say
you.
it's like one. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so we talked about oppositions. Oh, okay, so that's what I was saying. So for Saturn energy in oppositions, we think of like what Saturn does, or like Saturn's stick. It's about limitation. It's about some sort of struggle. I wouldn't say that oppositions are limiting. They take work. Literally, like think about like two people having a conversation and one person, like for the sake of like just driving this point home, think of like political debates. You have like the person from one party and a person from another party, and they're literally debating. They're debating the same thing. They have like the general same want, which we could say is just to make whatever country a better place. That is the general thing. But they're going about it in two very different ways, and they have two very different ideas about what that means. And so there's opposition there, there's tension there. Which ideally for oppositions to release some of that tension is finding a common ground. Um, but that in regards to like a natal chart or in regards to like a transit, you would need to find what is the middle ground, what is the balance between the two. So I'd say like for oppositions, think of it almost like the two planets are like debating. Um, I mean, I guess you could even say fighting, but Saturn is not as like action packed as Mars, and so I'd say like debating, very strongly debating. Okay, so any questions about oppositions? And then we're gonna go into a little bit of practice. I didn't ask about the homework. Did anybody have any trouble with the homework and any questions about the homework? Because this was the homework from last week for the chart practice. We kind of went through, I think like on the handout right before this, there was like another practice, one that we did for homework, but did anybody have any trouble with the homework last week or any questions? Okay, cool. Okay. So I am going to pull up the first celebrities chart, and we're just going to talk about the natal stuff right now. And we're going to even use these questions to kind of help guide us. Oh yeah, honey, if you want to share, yeah, no, I would like that. I didn't know if you wanted to share, so I didn't want to push you. So yeah, no, if you wanted to share what you got for your answers, let's see. Let's see, it's a Google Doc, so let me open that really quick. Okay, so we are gonna just kind of take awesome. So if everyone doesn't mind, I'm just gonna go through the homework that Honey did for her friend, and just kind of like answer any questions, and I think it could be like a good example. And we'll kind of go through this, the homework really quick. So let me share the screen. Okay, so I have to stop share and then I have to share it again. Okay, so I just have to share this whole screen. Okay. All right. So let me see if I can zoom in on this. I don't think. I might have to download it. The PDF. Hold on. Okay. I think I should be able to zoom in now. The question is where, oh, here it is, automatic zoom. I totally missed that. Okay, here we are. Okay, so we have, I'm sorry, I don't want to keep calling your friend, Honey. So what's their name?
Shane.
Shane. Okay, so we have Shane's chart. Shane is a Libra rising, Sun in Aries, Moon in Virgo. So let's look at the first question. So do they have a day or a nighttime chart? So they're a Libra rising. The Sun is up here in the 7th house. So this ascendant, descendant line, as we were talking about, I think last class or the class before it, I've lost track now when we talked about houses, but it's what we could also call as like the horizon line of the day you were born. And so the sun is above that line. And so therefore we would say that this is a daytime chart because the sun has technically not set over this descendant line where it's kind of descended into the nighttime part. So we would assume that light is still out while Shane was being born. So we'd say that this is a daytime chart. And so then my follow-up question would be is where are the benefics and malefics in this chart. So the benefic, you have to, honey, I would just say that you just switch them. So the benefic is going to be Jupiter, and then the malefic is Saturn and Aries. So the Jupiter and Pisces would be the benefic, and then the malefic would be Saturn and Aries. But you did get like the placements correct though. Just switch those. So he has Saturn and Aries, which would be the malefic, because Saturn is a malefic planet, and then Jupiter is a benefic. And so benefics support, and they say basically yes to things, especially in a daytime chart. And Saturn kind of limits, corrupts, or it says no to things. And like we learned in whatever class ago that when we were talking about benefics and malefics, the Saturn and Jupiter are the daytime benefic and malefic planet in particular. So that's why Honey really looked at those two planets in particular when I asked about the benefic and malefic, is because in particular for a daytime chart, those are the two planets that we want to look at. For just kind of like different energy in the chart. So, okay, so where are the sun and moon, and what do their placements say about Shane? So, the sun and moon, the sun is going to be in Aries in the 7th, and then we have the moon in Virgo in the 12th house. So let's see what you wrote. So moon is in Virgo in the 12th. So we have, I like this first one, a habit of self-sabotage. So literally the moon is going to be habits. The 12th house does have self-sabotage as one of its main things that it represents. Emotionally, it's also like, I guess, again, I don't want to say that houses are tied to signs, but the 12th house does have like that kind of feeling of being more emotional. I would say the only way I would kind of critique that one is it's more about like isolation, or being alone. But I do really like the comment about being not being emotionally grounded, or maybe having some struggles with connecting with the emotions, because it's moon in Virgo, not necessarily because it's the 12th house. I have no doubt that this person is sensitive, but there might be just an uncomfortableness about their feelings about things, and they might keep that very much to themselves because it's in the 12th house. So it's like literally the emotions are kept isolated from other people. They don't really show their emotions too much, which could cause a whole lot of other things to happen, just kind of like by common sense. But in particular, because we're talking about astrology, having moon in the 12th house can just be a lot of emotions in particular. And I like the emotions again, the emotional comment, because I'm like, it's the moon, so it's your emotions.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Where does she get this information from?
So, she's putting together basically everything that we've learned up to this point.
Okay.
Yeah. So, we're like at the last like 1 or 2 classes. So all of these answers that she's coming up with and these interpretations that she's coming up with are a result of what we've learned so far.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see. Just kind of like jumping around here. They're strong-willed in the face of adversity and loss. I think that could definitely be like a Virgo in 12th house Virgo moon, because it's like I don't show my emotions. But Virgo is still very much about being of service to other people. So it can say, yes, I'm an emotional mess, but that doesn't mean that I don't have a bleeding heart for others. And I want to be there for other people, even if I myself am like, not doing well. Um, I would say that this also makes them, though, hold on, let me see if you actually notated this before I give my own 2 cents on it. Um, okay, you didn't, but I like all this is correct for the moon in Virgo. I do want to add my own like little 2 cents on the moon in Virgo, because a lot of people don't like having their moon in general in the 12th house. In particular, like I've just seen like a lot of mothers that get very nervous about their child having their moon in the 12th, because it does suggest some sort of like distance. Um, the like with like that the person is putting like with their emotions, or maybe like an over resonance with their emotions. um it can be like it says that the person can hide things very well, or there is some sort of um maybe even like a tendency to just be very, I don't, it can be like just like a very pessimistic kind of feel to the person's emotions. So people with moon in the 12th house can be very prone to anxiety or depression, which is usually, I think, why moms in particular might be very concerned about their child having moon in the 12th house. However, I would also say that moon in the 12th house people are usually some of the most intuitive people that I have ever met. um, and we literally have the planet that has a lot to do with intuition and your feelings and just kind of psychic abilities in a house that has to do with connecting with um, that spiritual realm. Um, Moon in the 12th can also be about endings as well, which can, I guess, also be seen as in a pessimistic light as well. So there can be like just kind of all kinds of anxieties around things changing. But I would also say the best way that you could see that is also like the person can be very comfortable with change. On the other end, it can be saying with moon in particular that things are constantly changing in this person's life. And so they never feel comfortable or safe, because they feel like people are always going to leave. Um, so they might have a bit of trust issues as well. And that's not, particularly to your friend Shane, honey, but I'm just saying like moon in the 12th house in general can sometimes have those issues. But let's see, let's move on to sun in Aries in the 7th. So the 7th house is all about your partnerships, what you do for fun, or like in leisure. It's not the only house that that talks about like what you do for fun, but it can also be like who you partner with. Like one-on-one relationships is the big thing about the 7th house. But Aries is about you. It's about me. It's like about the person. Um, it's about the individual, and so you kind of have with Aries in the 7th, it can either create relationships where it's almost like very one sided, um, or it can be, I think, at its best, it can be someone that can be a very much champion for other people. Um, or it can be like they learn about themselves through relationships with other people. At the worst, it could be like somebody that's just very selfish in relationships, or someone that's very combative. But we would have to look more into Shane's chart in particular to know that. But let's read what Honey said. So they tend to butt heads with their romantic partners, as it can be headstrong and bold. I would say that is a perfect interpretation of Aries in the 7th, because Mars is going to be the ruler of Aries. And so therefore Mars is ruling over their 7th house of relationships, which makes for some very conflict oriented partnerships. They say, let's see what else. Structure is important to them, and they'll make adjustments to their waking life and plow through any difficulties that stand in their way. I can see how you got that. I think it is possible to be a bit more specific since it is the 7th house. I see where you're going. And it's not, and it's right. I just think that you could have added a little bit more there, and I'll just say why. So let's go up to Shane's chart really quick. So it's talking about somebody that's very ambitious, essentially. Aries is very ambitious. It says, I pioneer things. I make the things happen. I really strive to create something new, or to be on top of things, to conquer things, essentially. Also, they have Mars and Aries. In this chart, I would consider Mars and Aries to be in the 7th. So that one adds to what Honey was saying about them having conflict in their romantic relationships. But I'd also say that because Mars is in Aries, they're very ambitious, but it's also squaring up against the 10th house, opposing the 1st house of them. It's all going to say, I want to conquer things. I want to be the first for things. Not just in relationships, in work. It points to somebody that's very driven. And that, I think, is like a way that we can see squares as a good thing. It's just I think, a thing of like moderation at that point. And whether the person knows how to moderate or not just depends on the work that they've done in their personal life. But because there's all kinds of potential here for it to be its best expression or its worst expression. But we can also see that what Honey is saying about Shane is also correct, because Saturn is right next to Mars and it's co-present with Mars. So this, I would say in particular, also adds to that, because it says they're someone that's not afraid of hard work. Saturn is limitation, and you literally have Mars right there. It says I'm going to push past limitation. So it's literally plowing through things. All right, have a safe drive, Melanie. Or Melody, sorry. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so then let's continue. They're a bit egotistical, stubborn. Yeah, no, I'd say that stubborn can definitely be, I'd say, yeah, headstrong, definitely. Stubborn is something I associate more with the fixed signs, but not to say that Aries can't be stubborn. I think Aries is stubborn in like a different way. They'll change how they're attacking a situation because it's cardinal. So it says, I'm going to get it however I need to get it. But if this way is not working, then I'll just rotate and like attack the problem from a different point until I find some sort of way to get through. So I'd say so far this is great. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of like skimming because I know that we only have 45 minutes left. So their risings in Libra. I do want to take time to look at this. So they have their rising or their ascendant sign in Libra. This is important because that makes Venus the ruler of their chart. So let's read what Honey said about some of the things that Honey said about Shane being a Libra rising. They care deeply for things that they believe in, but it's more on an intellectual level than emotional. I'd agree with that because Libra is an air sign, and so it's about like, what do you value? And depending on what else is in the first house, this could point to beliefs, which I would see beliefs are going to be a Jupiter thing. So especially if like the chart ruler Venus is in some sort of aspect with Jupiter, in particular, it can definitely be about their belief system or just kind of like what they value as far as beliefs. They take pride in their appearance, absolutely. Libra risings, not every Libra rising is the same. However, we're just talking about Libra risings in general. Usually Libra risings, as long as they don't have some sort of adverse aspect to their first house, they usually do care quite a bit about what they look like. They want to, either look fashionable or, always like at the very least clean and hygienic, because Venus is going to be more so about cleanliness. They're conscious of how others perceive them. I'd say that's absolutely, yeah, no, that's a spot on interpretation of Libra rising. And they lean towards the practical versus the flamboyant. I'd say definitely so. Libra doesn't have to be, because it's an air sign, it's more so about like connecting with others. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be extra. It just needs to be attractive to other people. And sometimes being a bit extra or flamboyant it causes too much, like it's too much of the extreme side of things. And so it's more so about like, I want to be balanced, which is literally the scales for Libra. And so it says, I want to be personable, so that I can draw in the relationships that I need to be in, or that I want to be in. Technology and numbers come easy. I would say that technology and numbers isn't necessarily a Libra rising thing. However, if there's another planet at play, then that could definitely be a thing. But I wouldn't say that technology and numbers is a Libra rising thing on its own. Another planet would have to be at play for that. They like romance. That's good. Tend to overthink things without realizing they're taking the emotion out of it. Absolutely. Let's move on. What are the other personal planets saying about this person? So they have Mercury and Aries in the 7th. We talked about the 7th house a little bit. I like it. Okay, so we're gonna talk about this. So they were actually, Shane was actually born with Mercury retrograde in the 7th. So I talked about Mercury being retrograde natally in someone's chart. It's kind of like what we experience Mercury retrograde, like only for like part of the year. It's happening all the time in that person. So like during Mercury retrogrades, we often experience like communication issues or misunderstandings, or maybe overthinking things, needing to rethink things, or needing to redo things. That is always happening. Like that's just kind of like their default setting with people with Mercury retrograde. A lot of times people with Mercury retrograde take more time to look at the pros and cons of things, or they can go back and forth. With Mercury and Aries, though, it's really interesting because I also had Mercury and Aries. So I'd say that Mercury and Aries can be a lot about talking, saying like the first thing that comes to your mind. However, because it's retrograde, it can be a lot of like, yes, saying the first thing that's on your mind, and then maybe backpedaling later and then clarifying, or it can be like, now I'm saying this. It can also be like, it can also inhibit the Aries part of things. It can just be a lot of back and forth thought of what you want to say. Because it's a Mars ruled sign, I'd say that I see that, I'm sorry, I'm like talking and giving my 2 cents, but also like reading what Honey wrote. And so I saw like misunderstood, definitely. The native was born with Mercury retrograde, which means they believe people cannot understand them well. Whether others do or don't understand them is up for debate. but the native believes and feels that they are often misunderstood. I agree with that for sure, because Aries is the individual. And so they might feel very misunderstood in their relationships, no matter how many times they, maybe repeat themselves, which is a very Mercury retrograde natal thing to do, is to have to constantly repeat themselves, or restate their stance on things, can be another way. But always feeling like there's some sort of miscommunication is definitely like a Mercury retrograde, especially in the 7th house, because it feels like your people that you're talking to one-on-one never understand you. It can also be somebody that maybe just doesn't communicate well. They have to maybe put a little extra work into communication with others, because so often Mercury retrograde natal people have thought through what they want to say so much, but they never actually say it to the other person. It's kind of like they almost expect other people to know what they're thinking because they thought it so much. But that is by person to person and not necessarily shame, but just again, adding in my 2 cents there. I'm going to get away from the 7th house because we talked about it a lot. But let's look at Venus and Pisces in the 6th. So Venus and Pisces is actually a really great placement. It's where Venus is exalted. And exalted just means that basically Venus is able to express its own significations. So the things that Venus rules over are able to express themselves almost like extremely well in the sign of Pisces, because the sign of Pisces adds so much to what Venus is already saying, basically. So think of like Venus, like Pisces being like Venus's favorite place to be. Or think of even like your favorite place to go when you're not at home, whether it be the craft store, because that's like my favorite place. So I'm using that. I'm using that as an example. The craft store is my favorite place. So say that I'm Venus and I go from my house where I'm comfortable to the craft store. I'm creative, and so I am like in the party zone. Venus in Pisces is like that. So think of like your favorite place, and that's like what exaltation means. You are able to be yourself to the umpteenth degree when you have a planet in its exalted sign. So he has Venus and Pisces in the 6th house, which I'm not going to lie, does put a little damper on things, because the 6th house is not creative. It's about conflict. It's about breakups. It's about routine. It's about like workplace and coworkers, and it's very, we have to remember that the 6th house is where Mars has its fun at. And so Venus is it's the opposite of Mars. So let's see what Honey wrote. They tend to be a dreamer in the face of adversity. I like that. That sums up Venus in the 6th really well. Adversity is literally the 6th house. And then we have like tending to be a dreamer or just very creative is Venus in Pisces. Very nice. Not necessarily thinking everything will turn out okay, but trying to find the beauty in despair. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Taking care of others naturally. They tend to be fluid in their sexuality, and like it when others seem like it when others see them in a sexual light. I can see where you're getting that. I can see that. Yeah. Pisces is like bedroom pleasures, especially since you have the 12th house opposing the 6th. And Venus is opposed to the 12th. And so it can be like, how do others see me? Because what is the 12th house to the 6th, if not what the 7th is to the 1st? So it's still some sort of like me versus other people kind of thing. So it's right. But again, I think like we could add some more things in there. But that's just me personally. But I mean, it's right for sure. Taking care of others comes naturally. Absolutely. Venus and Pisces is very much about compassion. The sixth house is also about like what kind of manual labor or work or how are you of service to other people. I'm wondering if you wrote anything about health, because sixth house is also about your health as well. And so I don't know what Shane's health is like. I feel like it could go either way. Either like Venus and Pisces can be very much like a person that just is naturally healthy. And so they really don't take care of themselves like consciously, like health wise, because they're just very lucky in that area of life. Or it can be somebody that's, I guess, like on the negative side, it can be like, they have always been healthy. So they are not someone that really looks for any kinds of signs of issues with health. Um, let's see. Traits of beauty, being good with finances and feeling the pleasures in life comes easy to the native. With finances, I'd say that might be coming from Venus, true. I would want a little bit more on that, because we could also ask about like what's happening in the second too, since the second is directly like your finances or their finances. Things such as daily routine, work responsibility also come easily. I'd say that's true. Yeah, absolutely. I want to, okay, so we're towards the end. Okay, so I'm gonna just pick one more and then we'll move on to, I guess, our game. Let's talk about the aspects to the ascendant, because as we've talked about, true, you have your sun and moon sign. However, you can be like a Capricorn, for instance, and have a Pisces rising. And you're still a Capricorn, but you might find that you're maybe a bit more creative or a bit more compassionate or a bit more dreamy than other Capricorns. That's coming from your Pisces rising. And I'll repeat this as well, because I think it really drives home how important the ascendant is that I guess before modern astrology more came into view, when people used to ask you your sign, they weren't asking your sun sign. Or I guess like, yeah, before like sun sign astrology became like a big thing, when people asked you your sign, they weren't asking you about your sun sign, they're asking you about your ascendant, because the ascendant is literally the house that talks about you. So the first house and therefore the ascendant is extremely important to kind of get a lot of information from the natal chart in particular in a short amount of time. So aspects that are being made from other planets to the ascendant are extremely important. So we have the ascendant is in opposition to the sun and Mercury. Nice. So we have a bit of tension between the person's sense of self to their sense of self, or a different aspect of them, like their vitality, health. I wonder if Shane struggles with a sense of self in their relationships, as well as Mercury. Speaking up for themselves, I could see being a thing, or feeling like they have to either overcompensate in relationships when speaking up for themselves. So either not speaking up for themselves at all, or like completely bulldozing other people could come up, especially since Mercury is retrograde in the seventh house opposing the ascendant. I wonder if that could also be a way that it plays out. Uranus is in a trine So I would say, without having to look up at their chart, having Uranus in a trine to your ascendant, to me, it says that they're very open-minded. Uranus is very inventive. And so it can be somebody that maybe is a bit quirky, eccentric. Um, I would also say that we were talking, I can't remember what section it was in. I was in one of the first sections that you were talking about. This was actually what I was looking for. When we were talking about technology and numbers coming easy to them, this is why numbers in technology comes easy to them, because that's a very Uranus thing, is technology and math are very Uranus-like things. And so if that comes easy to them, it's because of the trine from the ascendant to Uranus. In a conjunction to Lilith. So we may be able to get to Lilith and asteroids today. If not, we'll talk about that in the next class. I think the next class will actually be a Facebook Live class. So if you're able to attend that, that'd be awesome. If not, I'll also probably review the asteroids in our next Zoom class. But I'm just saying, like, if you don't want to wait possibly 2 months, since me and Alex still have to kind of get that together, then I'll be covering asteroids and including Lilith in the next class. So a conjunction to Lilith could mean a lot of things, which I would have to look up at the chart for. But you're not sure what the ascendant means. Okay, yeah, no. As far as aspects relating back to the ascendant, but not knowing what the symbols mean, that's fine. Because at that point we hadn't learned about the aspects yet. Are there any aspects being made from the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th house? We talked about actually quite a few of them. Let's talk about the fourth house, since we didn't talk about the fourth house. There are no aspects to the fourth house. However, let's look up at what sign is ruling over the fourth house and where the ruler of that sign is. So if they're a Libra rising, then their fourth house is automatically going to be Capricorn. If we're looking at this in a whole sign chart. This is not a whole sign chart. However, that's how I'm looking at it and how we would usually look at it for like this class. Actually, no, it's a whole sign. My bad. I got confused by like the bold lines. Jesus Christ, never mind. Sorry about that, honey. This is a whole sign chart. But so we are saying that it's Libra rising, so therefore it's going to be Capricorn as the fourth house, which means that Saturn rules over the fourth house, because Saturn rules over Capricorn, and if Capricorn is the fourth house, and therefore Saturn rules over the fourth house. So we would look at, where is Saturn? So even though there are no planets in the fourth house, there's still stuff going on with the fourth house. So Saturn is in the seventh, which I imagine makes for a tumultuous family life. Or at the very least, maybe like a family dynamic that maybe pushed Shane to be successful very early in life. It's not the typical like cuddly family environment when we're looking at Saturn ruling over the fourth house. There's some sort of limitation, or it can be like somebody that didn't grow up with a lot of money or resources, because Saturn is ruling over that. Saturn in Aries is going to be, if anything, is going to be maybe somebody that had to make it on their own, or they had to raise themselves in their home life, especially since we have Saturn in an in a square to it looks like Neptune. No, actually no. This is interesting. So the red
because that would actually be, I wonder why that's in red. I think it might be because it's so close to Capricorn, since Neptune is at 1 degree of Aquarius, it's still counting it as a square. But this would actually be a sextile, because it's between a fire and an air sign. So these two are, to me, this is actually a sextile. But it's listing it as a square because it's just barely out of Capricorn. So I'll interpret it both ways. Having Saturn in a sextile to Neptune can be like, I can be whatever I want to be. So again, it adds to the dreamer aspect. If it's a square, then it might say that I had to have this dream of what my life could be because I didn't have anybody else like helping me at all. Because Neptune can also be about isolation, but it can be about dreams and what we create. Saturn is very much, what do you like actually make? What's the foundation that you make? Because Saturn is in the 7th, it can put a restriction on the relationship, which would add to the isolation as well. But you could see it, I guess, either way. It just depends. Oftentimes when you get things like this, it's a mix of both. We could keep going, honestly, and look at where what house Neptune rules over to get more context as well. But we are going to close this out and kind of go from there. So overall, honey, this was really, really good. Thank you for letting us look at your homework for an example. So let me refocus here on the chart that we have. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. Why is it not? Oh, here it is. I was like, why is it so small? Okay, so we have our first celebrity, possibly the only celebrity for today's lesson. I talked so much. I apologize, but I thought it would be a really good thing. I wanted to definitely take that opportunity to look at homework. But so we have this celebrity, the Leo rising, Moon in Virgo, and then they have their sun in Taurus in the 10th house. So Moon is in the 2nd, and the ruler of their whole chart is their sun, and the sun is in Taurus in the 10th. So we're just going to look at this as a natal chart first. Let's pick out what is a conjunction or a co-presence that they have. We're going to go down the line and look at some of the aspects that they have in their chart. So just kind of looking at this, what planets are in the same sign? We'll just say for right now, what planets are in the same sign? Therefore being like a conjunction. Can you find a conjunction in this chart?
How about Mercury and Saturn?
Yeah, Mercury and Jupiter. Yeah, so Saturn is down here. Saturn's the one that kind of looks like a H with a cross on top of it. But Mercury and Jupiter are definitely together. But we could also add Mercury, Jupiter, and the sun are all in a co-presence or conjunction together. Very good.
That's what I was thinking, but I just recognized it as the wrong planet.
Yeah, no, I think once you said Mercury, I figured you meant like all this up here. Absolutely. Yeah, no. There is another one. Does anybody see it? We haven't really, again, to be fair, I'd be happy just with the Mercury, Jupiter, Sun conjunction, because to be fair, we haven't talked about the outer planet. But does anybody see the other one?
Would it be Saffron and Venus?
It's Chiron and Venus. Yes, that would also be a conjunction. Yes. So that was one that I wasn't even looking at. But yes, that would also be a conjunction. There's one more.
Saturn and Uranus.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's the one I was looking at. So Saturn and Uranus are in a conjunction together, and we could also say that Saturn, Uranus, and also Neptune are in a conjunction because they're all in Capricorn. Sorry about like the noise. There is a thunderstorm rolling through. So I apologize if if you guys can hear the thunder. So yes, so we have like I think like three, let me zoom out a little bit. Yeah, 3 sets of conjunctions here that are happening in this celebrities chart. So, what was the next one? So it was can you pick out a sextile that they might have? If they have one, do they have one is the question. Yeah, they have one. Can you find a sextile that they have? To be fair, the sextile is also with an outer planet too. If you don't know all the glyphs for the planets, you can just say whatever planet is in this sign, or just like tell me essentially where it is, and then I can kind of guess what you're talking about. But yeah,
Would it be Pluto and Moon?
it is. Yes. So it would be between the sextile would be between Moon in Virgo and Pluto in Scorpio. Very nice. What about trines? Because they have quite a few. Or not quite a few, but they have more than one. So we can say a couple, I guess. So remember, a trine is going to be same element, but not the same sign.
So like Moon, Sun, and I think it's Saturn. They're all Earth signs.
Yep, absolutely. So you have Moon in Virgo, and then all these planets in Capricorn. So that'd be Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune. And it's also in a trine to all this stuff up here in Taurus in the 10th house, which would be Mercury, Jupiter, and Sun. All this is one big trine, one grand Earth trine. Let's see. There's one more that we can pick out, or I guess there are technically 2 more, but the other one we haven't talked about, so I'll just count it as like there's one other one. Did anybody see it? If not, I can help you out. So it's going to be between Venus and Gemini up here in the 11th, and Mars in Aquarius in the 7th is the last trine. I guess like technically, oh, you're fine, honey. Technically, you could also count. There's a trine between Pluto and the North Node, but we haven't talked about the North Node like at all. And I'll mention it briefly next class. But I actually have a book recommendation for the North Node. I'm sure at some point I'll get to like actually talking about the North Node in depth, because it definitely is interesting. I just don't think I could make like a whole course about the North Node. I mean, I guess I could if I went through all the signs and all the houses, but I haven't created any kind of structure for that yet. But there's a trine between Pluto and Scorpio and the North Node in Pisces, which will be really interesting how we see things unfold for the celebrity in about a year and a half when the nodes move, because they'll be having their nodal return in about a year and a half when the North Node moves back into Pisces. So that would be like what, 2025, I think, is when the North Node will move into Pisces, and South Node will be in Virgo on their moon too. Definitely some interesting stuff that'll probably happen. Okay, so then we have last is oppositions. There is one huge one. But I don't think last week, because we didn't do squares yet, did we? I don't think we did squares. No, we didn't. Let's just talk about oppositions first. I think they just have one opposition, if we're not counting like Lilith. Which actually Lilith could actually be really interesting to talk about. But yeah, let's just talk about what, I guess, one blaring opposition do you see?
Would that be Mercury? I keep getting the two mixed up. Saturn and the moon with
Yep.
the opposite being is it Chiron?
So that I think you're looking at, so the opposition, because I know that there's a square. I'm going to give the answer to the square, my future square question. So there's a square between Venus and the moon, but there's an opposition between Mercury, Jupiter, and the sun, opposed to Pluto down here in Scorpio. And that's actually a really big opposition, especially what's kind of going on right now. And I wanna like, there's also a because I want this to be a game, so I don't want to like give away who this celebrity is, but I think it's interesting because I didn't even realize that Venus started retrograding over their Lilith, which makes so much sense. But there's an opposition between Lilith and Mars in the 7th as well. So we actually talked about one of the squares, which is going to be between Venus and the moon, but there's another square that's happening. There are two squares that are happening. One of them is involving Pluto, to be fair, But can you find the other one?
Is it Pluto and Mars and then Mars and Mercury?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it would be Pluto, because I'm like, this is actually creating what we would call a T-square between the opposition from Pluto, and then a square to Pluto as well is a T-square, because it would ideally create like some sort of T. But T-squares are tough, especially when you have them natally, but like usually it's something that we've gotten used to because there's always some sort of tension there. You can imagine with having some sort of square natally, but also there's extra pressure added with T-squares because there's an extra opposition happening. So she's got 2 squares to Mars, to Pluto, and then Pluto has a opposition to 3 major planets. One of them being the ruler of the chart. And so ideally T-squares, I'm going on a tangent right now, but like ideally T-squares can create great change and therefore create massive transformation. On their more negative side, it's kind of like one huge, like, it's like, I don't know if anybody, I mean, I'm sure everybody either knows what this is, even if you haven't seen it. Like when a car gets T-boned, that's like the energy of a T-square. It's literally like 3 cars are trying to go all at once. And it creates like this, like, very dramatic kind of chaos. If not handled properly. The thing with T-squares, how you relieve the tension is you have to find the planet that's at the apex. So in this person's case, they would need to focus on Mars. What is Mars trying to do? Mars needs to be the first one to go. If we're talking about like all these planets as far as like cars that are all at a stoplight and are trying to go at the same time, you would need to let Mars go first, or you need to lead with Mars, and then the rest of them can go later. So we've gone through all of the aspects. So let's talk about how we might interpret some of these. I'll help for sure, but let's start with like a trine, since that's one of their big ones. Their Earth trine. So let's say, like, how would you interpret the moon Mercury, the moon in Virgo to Mercury in Taurus? If you guys need help, just let me know. I just don't want to give the answer without giving you a chance to answer it. So it's moon in the 2nd in Virgo is trine Mercury in Taurus in the 10th.
I would say they can be very grounded in their emotions, and their communication is good and to the point, and can share how they feel, but also not become over emotional about it.
Mm-hmm.
Almost just, this is what it is, this is what I need, this is what I need you to do. And if you can't provide that for me, I'm going to provide it for myself.
Yes, absolutely. I think that was a great interpretation. Yeah. So the moon is going to be like how we feel, but it can also be like where we experience a lot of change, or like our habits and things like that. In Virgo, it can be a lot about like, you'll see like a lot of Moon and Virgo people in particular are very fixated on their like how their appearance, like how they look. Like Nicki Minaj, for instance, is a Moon in Virgo, and one of the big things that, as I guess as a celebrity in general, you know, this is really talked about, but is like this, like the fitness aspect of her body or what her body looks like is usually a big point with people with Virgo moons. They either always want to make sure that they're healthy is like a concern for them. So even if it's not them being in the gym 24/7, which that can definitely be a thing, they always have an idea of what looks good to them, and they want to constantly make sure that they are portraying that. So with that being said, because the second house is also like the resources that we have. This person wants to make sure, because they have Moon in Virgo in the second, that they always have enough for themselves so that they can maybe give to other people. Since Virgo, it's about being of service to others. So it's like, I have to make sure that I'm good first, and then I can be of service to other people. But I'm definitely here to maybe nurture and be of service to other people. And I have some sort of idea of what is healthy and what is mine. As far as like body, food, money, security, all that is very much a concern, and they express that out in the world. It's very, like, their thoughts on it are very public because of that trine to Mercury and Taurus. So they're not shy about sharing their ideas about these things. Taurus in particular is also money, but it's also like, because it's a Venus ruled sign, it's about comfort. It's about what tastes good, smells good, feels good. It's about sensuality. I would say, because also Jupiter and the Sun are also playing a part here, it's doubly like something that they're not shy about talking to other people about. So that is the trine. We'll move past that. Let's talk about some of the spicier aspects of their chart. Let's talk about the square to, let's say, the Sun to, or I guess because Mars is in a direct square to Mercury, but we've already talked about Mercury, so let's talk about like the Sun Mars not opposition, square from Taurus to Aquarius in their chart. So we have Sun in Taurus in the 10th of like career and public and being out in the public and the reputation and things like that. It's in a square to Mars and Aquarius in the 7th, and the 7th is about like partnerships and things of that nature. So what could your interpretation of that square be?
So I could be totally wrong about this, but
If
okay.
you're wrong, to be wrong and strong. I heard that, and I was like, yes.
I'm just gonna go for it. I would say, the Sun being in Taurus, with like being, that really earthy and grounded, but yet, they like their comforts and all of the good stuff that goes along with Taurus, but it's very like down to earth and grounded, if you will. Whereas Aquarius, and then especially the Mars and relationships, that could really battle because, being down and grounded, but yet they want to be like Aquarius is kind of, on a different page, kind of wants to be weird, kind of wants to be, different and likes the different things. And so I could really see where like the grounded and wanting in their relationships, like, most people want flowers, whereas they want tacos in Home Depot. Yes, I'm talking about myself. But so I could see where that opposition, where they really want to let go of that. And then Mars is, passion and fire and like they really want to let it out, but that Earth is like keeping it in a little ball maybe. And so it might be hard for them, where they really, really have to find a partner that they are so stinking comfortable with, and maybe actually takes a while, maybe a year or more, before they will let that freak in the sheet out, because they are they want to let that out, but the Taurus side is like holding them back.
I like that. It's not wrong. I want a little extra. And I'll say here's why. Like there's just something missing, but I'm trying to like pinpoint what is missing, but it's not wrong. I like that you pointed out like really good points about each of the planetary placements, because those are correct. So Sun in Taurus is going to be about what makes me feel good. It's very sensual, it's very fun, very harmonious, very earthy. It needs security in itself. I think also with Aquarius, it's going to be about like, what do we want for the future? Or like, what am I giving to other people? And I'd say the biggest conflict right now, not just with Taurus and Aquarius, is between the 7th and the 10th in particular. Because the 10th is like how other people see you. But Mars is like, Mars in the 7th in particular is going to be like partners having some weird, like weird conflict with others, or some very different conflict with others. And so I guess on a positive side, you have partners that maybe really push you, or people that really push you to be driven, or a lot of like naysayers can be something else that's like very much Mars in Aquarius. It's like you have to push past what other people have to say, because Aquarius is the collective, or it's like the group. So it can be like literally a group of people is a partnership, or like being very open to different things that maybe aren't conventionally normal in relationships, and having to be possibly very private, or keeping relationships very private, or just having a relationship that's just not conventional, and therefore you can't open up about that publicly, would be also how I'd say that. But I like the fieriness that you were talking about with Mars, because it's definitely going to be something that's eccentric, that's exciting, with Mars in in Aquarius. This person definitely, I think, wants a partner that's not shy about their different views on things, or wanting to have like a new, almost, I don't like, I wanted to refrain from saying this, kind of like a new world order kind of thing. I feel like they can actually have like partners that are a bit like megalomaniacs, like with this placement. Or I guess if we're bringing it back to the person and not their relationships, you could say that the collective that they are trying to support is not popular. They are a person that when they really stand up publicly for the underdog, they are given a lot of backlash for it publicly. That could be how this square plays out, since Aquarius is groups of people, and it's usually marginalized groups of people. And so like literally a fight for a marginalized group or a minority of people, or just kind of like an outcast group of people, since it's Aquarius, is in some sort of tension with who this person is, something with how they relate to groups of people and who they are on the public stage is really, it has a lot of tension with it. It causes some sort of issues. And that only gets more complicated when you also take into account that there's a square between the fourth house and between Pluto. So I'd be really interested to know. Unfortunately, I don't know much about this person's early like childhood. And I actually wouldn't expect to, because having Scorpio as the ruler of your fourth, they keep their home life very private. And I don't think that's something that they would probably like talk about too much. They might talk about it a little bit, but I don't think they talk about it like in great detail, even though it is in opposition to Mercury. If they do talk about it, I would think that they talk about it to make a point, or for like shock value is what I would guess. Let's see. So we kind of talked about the squares. What about the conjunction? Because I think that's like the last thing that we haven't really talked about. What about the conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter in Taurus? Or does anybody have any guesses of who this chart is? You guys might know. I've been trying to like give very generalized interpretations because I don't want to give it away, because it is a fun game. I thought it would be fun. It might not be fun at all. I don't know. But anybody have any guesses on whose chart this is?
Harvey, before you say anything, let me just say I was wrong. You're senior partner material. You were ready. You come back from your honeymoon. We're not coming back, Harvey. Rachel and I were offered a chance to run a firm in Seattle.
It is not Nicki Minaj.
I was thinking Sinead O'Connor.
It's not her. Well, do you, if anybody has one more guess, and then I'll tell you whose chart it is. And then we can look at transits. And that's like the fun thing that I was thinking. Or maybe we should do transits before we talk about whose chart this is. Because there's one huge transit that's happening right now that's basically setting off her person's whole chart. Let's do the transit first. Since I did bring up the Mercury in, not Mercury in Virgo, but the Venus retrograde that's happening in Leo, and it's in their first house. And it actually started over their Lilith. So I'll talk about Lilith briefly. So Lilith is about sexuality. It's about like, you know, the whole lore behind Lilith is like dark femininity or dark sexuality, and how we use that as kind of like as kind of like our own kind of like power. But it can also come through like trauma as well. Again, we'll talk more about Lilith next class when we go into like some of the lore of Lilith. and like the myths behind Lilith. And so when we do that, I think that that'll help a lot. But gotcha. Gotcha, Cardi. Yeah, no, it's okay. I'm like, to be fair, like I know very surface stuff about like celebrities, but I always like to know the tea. And this celebrity in particular has had a lot of tea spilled about them in the last couple of weeks. But yeah, Lilith is dark sexuality. That we use almost like as a power to like get a hold of a situation or to change something. So it's like it's kind of like when you know how like and I do apologize if I don't mean to offend anyone, but I try to make sure that I'm very conscious of language. So like when we had like the sexual revolution, I think we've actually had quite a few, but like the like burning of the bras, or like even when the term slut was turned from like something very negative and it was almost taken back by women, and now we have songs that include that word and it's not meant in like this derogatory term. That is very much a Lilith thing, to almost turn like sexuality on its head, or to change the ideas about it and use it to the benefit, usually of a woman, but it's usually more so centered around sexuality in general, because everybody has Lilith. Men have Lilith in their chart, and it plays a point. I bring this up because Venus started its retrograde on this person's Lilith, so it had a lot to do with them and their sexuality. In particular, sexuality and maybe some taboo things having to do with people that they work with, which means that it would also square all of this up here. So it played out very publicly. So and Jupiter is actually in their 10th house right now, being reactivated. So this is kind of like a sucky Jupiter return for them. Because Jupiter returns are usually very positive, but having a Venus retrograde in their first house it is not Liz Taylor. It's Lizzo's chart, to be honest with you. It's I was getting excited there. I saw Liz and I was like, yes. No, so this is Lizzo's chart, and she's had some allegations of sexual harassment, as well as what else was she accused of? Creating a hostile work environment for her dancers. So that Venus retrograde, it would deal with women in particular, especially women of the arts, since it's all in Leo. And Venus is also the arts, and so it can be like dancers. But what's funny is that Mars in Aquarius can also be like dancer, since dance is some form of exercise. How could we relate that back to what's happening now? So it's literally her and her, because the chart ruler is up here in the 10th, it's about reputation, some sort of souring of reputation due to sexual and work harassment or misconduct, or not, or mistreatment of the people that you partner with or work with you, since we're talking about Mars. We can also look at this as what we were talking about. I was trying so hard not to like give it away with this square. Aside from the allegations, we could say that Mars in Aquarius in the 7th can be plus size people, and really pushing to revolutionize how we're viewed. As a plus size person myself, I'll include myself as like we, but like just kind of like as that plus size community is viewed in the public setting through herself being part of that community, and that also creating a lot of backlash on being almost like a gift and a curse, as as far as like her reputation or how other people view her in the public setting as well. It's just very controversial. And let's see.
Can I ask, is it a black lady?
It is.
Ah, I don't know her name, but I have an idea who it is.
Yeah. So yeah, because she's been in the news quite a bit in the last couple weeks. I forget. And I think this all came out right, if not the week of Venus going retrograde. It was like maybe like a little over a week where all this started. I forget when it started, but so much has come out. But we can also see Mars in Aquarius being like not just a couple people, as we continue to learn. It's like it started out as 3 people in a lawsuit with her, which is interesting because Mars rules over her 9th house, which if we were looking for like some sort of transit that would suggest a lawsuit, Venus is opposing Mars in her 7th, but Mars rules over the 9th, which could be a lawsuit over the things that we already talked about with like Lilith. And so it's really interesting, like some of the things that you can kind of look at when you're looking at like just kind of like natal. You could actually see a lot of this in her chart, like natally. You don't have to necessarily, like, transits look at it at real time, but I suppose you could also see maybe like some of the same issues echoed, maybe not this situation in particular, you could see mirrored natally as well, especially because I'm like, this T-square is just huge. It's literally it's speaking to the 4 most important houses in a person's chart. Yeah, you have the ascendant that doesn't have any planets, I guess, if you're excluding Lilith. But the ruler of the chart, or the ruler of the 1st house, is up in the 10th, which is square to the 7th, which is square to the 4th. And so the moment that any of those 4 houses get triggered, everything else is triggered as well. So it's a lot of chaos that's just kind of happening. And I'm wondering also what will happen when Mercury does go retrograde, because I do believe it'll be retrograding over her moon as well. So we're not done hearing about some of the things that are happening or that have been happening, or possibly like where the lawsuit is going, or whether it'll, what kind of repercussions it will have for her career. But definitely interesting. Any questions? Because we are over time, like by 21 minutes. So I apologize. I ran a bit over.
Can you
Any
tell us who
questions?
it is? I want to see if I'm right in my thinking.
Oh yeah. So yeah, no. So this is Lizzo's chart. She's a American singer.
Yes, that is the person I was thinking about.
Yeah. So it's Lizzo's chart. And so yeah, that's whose chart it is. Any other questions before we talk about homework and then sign out? Okay, for homework. For those of you who it's your first class, just just get caught up on your own time. And I'll make sure I definitely send Alex the handouts, or I guess we only technically got through. I don't think we even got through. I'll send her this handout that with the aspects, because we didn't get to the other one. But I'll send that to her so that you guys can be all up to date on the handouts. And then for those of you that have been with me up until this point, basically all I want you to do is the same thing that you did last week, but add in the aspects so that it creates some sort of context for what the planets are saying. So basically what I want you to do is to read someone's natal chart, whether it be your own. I would rather it not be your own because we're usually impartial, or we're a bit biased. But if you can find like a friend, like Honey did for her friend Shane, I mean, friends, I guess you can also be biased with, but it's easier to not like to look at their chart rather than your own because you're not them. So find a friend's chart. If you can find like an acquaintance that, you know, would be willing to do that, then definitely that would also help. Or you can just like go into the natal chart calculator, input some information, and do that. Or you can pick out a celebrity's chart if you like, but add in the aspects. So basically read the natal chart, because up to this point we have covered everything actually, aside from the asteroids. So for reading charts, yeah, Honey, you can read Shane's chart again. If you can read his chart again, or if you want to do someone else's, that's fine as well. Someone asked a question about do I read charts? So I no longer read charts like for clients anymore, but what I will say, because I just do it for like in-person events, but what I will say is that for if you're like here for classes, usually I'll like for like some exercises I'll pick out charts that we can, like if it's like a small class, also usually everybody will get some part of their chart read. Or we can, I even have a recommended astrologer. She is pricier than I would be, but she is fantastic. She's been reading my astrology charts for like the better half of like, I think like 6 years now. And I can give you her information, but she does like all virtual stuff as well. I just don't read charts anymore. I closed down my business, and so I just teach and do events. But yeah, if you're usually here in like class consistently, then you'll usually get a lot, like parts of your chart read either by myself or like just kind of like as an activity with the rest of the students. Like, because we'll like last class we played Can You Spot It? Like the game Can You Spot It, where we were talking about like life situations that we've always kind of had in our lives. Like I think somebody last class was talking about their issues that they've had with partners, and always kind of like choosing partners that were into like very shady things, and that being a very consistent thing in their life. And we brought up the chart and we're looking at where would you find that in someone's chart? What aspects and placements in that chart would you see that kind of interpretation probably coming to light? Granted, you can see a lot of things coming from an interpretation, so, but that just happened to be like, you know, what they brought up, and we interpreted what planet, what aspect and planet placement was most likely the culprit. And so, yeah, that I would say could also be like a, I guess, kind of like chart reading. But I personally, yeah, I don't do charts virtually anymore. If you kind of have to be in front of me now, or at an event, or I can give you a recommendation. But any other questions? If not, we're gonna sign out of here.
I have a question. So
Sure.
I have missed the other classes, and I was looking on the YouTube channel, and there is 3 classes that were uploaded like 3 weeks ago. So was this technically class 4, or have you done more? Because I just missed the other ones. I don't know. I guess I didn't see them through the academy. I don't know.
Okay, let me see when we started, because I'm like, I could not tell you when we started class. Let me look at, I know I always give Alex the dates of the classes, so I can tell you when we started. And then like by that reasoning, I can give you the month that we started, and that would tell me how many classes. Let's see. Okay, so so Honey said that we've had 6 classes according to her notes. So I might have to ask Alex if she either has the recordings, because I'm like, she definitely told me, she was like, just record to the cloud, which is what I do when I start classes. So either she hasn't uploaded them or there's some sort of technical difficulties that's going on, possibly with the recording, but I'll definitely, when I send her the handouts for the class for today, I'll ask her about that so that you guys can hopefully get those up as well.
Well, and then I can just start with the 3 that are on there and go from there. And then the handouts that you send to her, is she putting them on the DiviNation Academy website, or where do I go then to find the handouts?
As far as I know, she's putting them on the website. Yes.
Okay, awesome sauce. Thank you.
Danny brought up a good point. One of the astrology classes was a Facebook Live. I can't remember which class that was, though. I can't remember. I think it might have been the first one. I can't remember, though. It was the first one. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Got you. Actually, I'll just type it in the let me just put it, because I'm sure everybody else will also want to have that information. I can put in her website. She also has a YouTube channel. Hold on, I can't type and talk at once. There. Okay, so see. Okay, so go to this website. Oh crap, it was a direct message. Hold on, let me send it to everybody. 1 second. Okay, so that should be to everyone. BeyondTheVeilTarot.com is Candace Marie's, I think her name is now O'Neill. She got married, but she has been my astrologer for like the better part of 6 years. She's absolutely phenomenal. She does have a YouTube channel where every Friday night she'll actually do discounted reading. So I think like an hour reading, like a regular hour reading with her, the last time I checked was $200 just for an hour with her. But that's for like a comprehensive, like anything you ever want to ask her, it's tarot, astrology, whatever, is $200. However, she does do like mini readings. Every, like for astrology, it's every other Friday on her YouTube channel. And her YouTube channel is also Beyond the Veil Tarot, I think. And she does, I think it's like $50 for like a natal chart question. But she's very good. She's studied with multiple astrologers. I think she's even gone to like we've gone to the same gone through the same astrology school slash program, which is Nightlight Astrology school, but she's also studied at I think a couple other astrology schools as well. She knows what she's talking about. She's also she also comes from a line of witches as well, and she's clairvoyant. She's like all the clairs. She is amazing. I've gotten readings for her for like the past 6 years, and she has never been wrong. Like I think her timing is a bit off, but the things that she's told me, like with my natal chart readings and like tarot readings, they are always spot on. So I would recommend her for sure. Unfortunately, I don't have like because I know like for myself, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I know for myself, $200 for an hour is a bit steep for me. So I always like have to gauge when I really need to talk to her. But unfortunately, I don't have anybody that is more affordable than that and gives like the same accuracy. But Candace is awesome, but she also uploads a lot of free content on her YouTube, like her horoscopes for the month for each sign are very detailed. Like I think for her July horoscopes, it was like a 5-hour video because she went into that much detail for each sign. So if you aren't able to, afford $200 for an hour talking to her, she uploads a lot of free stuff on her free information on her YouTube channel. And like, again, like even if you're not getting a reading from her like on like a Friday night, because she alternates with tarot and astrology readings. So like she'll do tarot readings one Friday, the next Friday she'll do astrology. And I think it's like 50 for a natal chart reading, but like 65 if you want like a synastry question. And then I forget how much tarot is, but I think tarot is like only $40 for like 3 cards and then like 20 for like 1 card, but she's good and I definitely would recommend her. But yeah, that is all I can give for personal recommendations. If you guys have any recommendations as well for like YouTube channels or whatever, I can definitely leave the chat open so you guys can share so that you guys can share like resources. We'll also have a class where we talk about some recommendations for books. That should probably be coming up in the next class as well. No problem. I look forward to, because I think it's like really nice, especially since astrology is so complicated. And therefore, like I do understand why Candace charges $200 for a reading, because it is a lot of mental work. It's a lot of spiritual work. You're looking into someone's into their own like soul file. So there's a lot of work that has to be done before you read a chart and after you read a chart. It's kind of like aftercare. And I think it's nice once you get the hang of it. Eventually, you won't have to like worry about even like getting readings from other people. To be fair, I just got to that point. I was like, so while I would like to get a reading from Candace, I don't have to because I've gotten to about the same point that she's at. But it's also something that you guys can look forward to. It's like, with enough practice, you can just read your own stuff. You don't have to pay anybody for it. But I'm just saying that because of the economy we're in right now. Everything's expensive. So it wouldn't surprise me if she's jumped up on prices again. But yeah, okay, so I'm rambling at this point, and I will see all of you guys in the next class. I still have to ask Alex about like when should our next class be, so that will be to be announced. So I will talk to you guys later.
Thank you so much, Micah. We'll talk to you at the next class. And
All right, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.